Well, as we've been reporting, peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are wrapping up in Geneva, with the US acting as mediator. Moscow has continued to apply pressure to Kyiv to accept the Kremlin's terms, even as another barrage of Russian missiles hit critical Ukrainian infrastructure overnight. Meantime, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy has accused Donald Trump of trying to push Ukraine to give up territory in order to secure a deal. Let's get more on this with Michael Bociurkiw, Senior Fellow at Atlantic Council and founder of the World Briefing Report on Substack. Michael, great to have you on the program as always. Now, the US seems to think the talks are going well, but not so from Ukraine, who claims President Trump is not being fair.
Yeah, good to be with you again, Yvonne. When you hear from the US side that quote-unquote meaningful progress has been achieved, well, I remember from my days with the OSCE, when we held talks, including with the Russians, meaningful progress usually meant there was very little progress. The Ukrainians had described the talks yesterday, the first of probably two, maybe more days, as very tense. But I got to tell you, one of the ways the Russians, in their kind of obscure way, send out signals is by who they send to lead their delegation. And this time, returning to the bargaining table is a chap called Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And I mention this because he is a former cultural minister and revisionist historian who said not too long ago that we are ready to fight for as long as it takes. And he reminded everyone that Russia and Sweden fought for 21 years. So with this type of character, it sends out a signal, I think, that they're going to be talking more about these bigger issues rather than if you sent a technocrat, you would probably get more done on the kind of minutiae items that are really, really important to settle.
So how telling is it then? Where do you see negotiations standing at the moment? If both sides appear unwilling to budge, what is the Kremlin after ultimately?
Oh, their objective is very, very clear. On the one hand, stringing things out as long as possible. And then on the other hand, giving them the free hand pretty much to bomb Ukraine relentlessly, as you reported. And you know, according to the UN today, new figures came out, more than 15,000 civilians killed in Ukraine, including almost 800 children, 41,000 civilians injured, and half of generating capacity lost. So that's what Russia wants to do, is bomb Ukraine into submission. But of course, that's not going to happen. One more quick thing here. I mean, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are heading the US side. They're very transactional. I think the problem for Ukrainians here is they'll want to achieve a deal very quickly that they could report back to their boss, Donald Trump, and say, hey, we've solved the 8th or 9th war. So that doesn't work in Ukraine's favor.
Well, of course, Donald Trump said he'd end the war in Ukraine in one day. But do you think his involvement, in fact, has made it worse for Ukrainians?
It absolutely has. And if you're the leader of Australia or my country, Canada, or Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom, you know, things change from day to day. You never know which Donald Trump will show up, number one. And number two, he may agree to something one day, for example, with the Ukrainians for long-range weapons. And then what happens a few hours later, typically, Vladimir Putin gets him on the phone and changes his mind. So the big issue right now for the Ukrainians to move forward is security guarantees. And that needs to be coming from the United States, not only Europe, whereas the Russians seem to be prioritizing territorial gains, even for territory that they have not gained militarily.
I understand Ukrainian drones have struck 9 oil refineries across Russia since the start of the year. What impact have these had on Moscow?
Quite a bit, Yvonne, quite a bit. But if you couple that with crackdowns by various nations of these so-called shadow fleets carrying Russian oil, if you couple that also with Donald Trump's apparent deal with India to stop buying Russian oil, these are all things that fund the Russian war machine. But it has to go beyond that, because when you're Russia and you have friends like Iran, North Korea, and China, well, those are big powers that can help you circumvent sanctions. I mean, I'm here in Asia right now, and I would love to see US allies like Thailand, for example, really crack down on Russian, for example, purchases of aviation parts that keeps their jets up in the air.
Well, next week, February 24th, marks the 4th anniversary of the war in Ukraine. Do you think that'll add more impetus to end the conflict there?
I wish so, but probably more impetus from the US side is the midterm elections in November, where the Republicans are not predicted to do well. House of Representatives will probably flip. Who knows, maybe even the Senate. So I think that puts some motivation into Mr. Trump's mind to settle this war so it's not kind of hovering over them. But again, Russia has no interest in ending this war. And that's what a lot of us really worry about. So I think it'll be more domestic political forces at home, along with Mr. Trump's enormous ego, bigger than the land territory of Australia, to get that Nobel Peace Prize and settle this. That's what motivates him, I think, at the end of the day.
Well, as we know, it's the citizens, the residents, civilians that suffer in Kyiv. They've survived on as little as 2 hours of electricity and heat a day in recent weeks. What's been the toll of this war on citizens, especially during the cold winter months?
Yeah, absolutely horrible. We have not seen anything like this in the past 4 years. I've been there most of the winter. And fortunately, Odessa, where I'm usually based, has been spared, but not anymore. So there is that toll of lack of power, lack of heating, and lack of water. And these things take a long time to repair. But the other thing I worried about it just before I left is we did have at least one wave of drones over Odessa, where I live, that seemed to have slipped through air defenses. That is really, really rare. So if we're to interpret that Russia has upgraded its technology for drones to evade Ukrainian radar and hence not set off alarms that allow civilians to flee to bomb shelters, that's a big escalation that does not play in Ukraine's favor, of course.
Indeed. Michael, really appreciate your thoughts and updating us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.